Educational Physics Podcast.
Hi, my name is João Figueiredo and welcome to episode number 7 of the Educational Physics Podcast. Today, my guest is one of the most important online drum educators of today. He is the founder of stevensdrumshed.com and theartofpractice.online. His name is Steven Taylor, and the reason why I wanted to speak to Steven about education is because, well, he is an authority in online education. He's one of the pioneers. He's one of the people who really push the boundaries of what online education can provide. And in my opinion, he's one of the few really doing it for the right reasons. He focuses on results, not just delivering content. I was curious to understand how he could do that efficiently via the internet. And believe me, his answers were extremely insightful and perhaps even changed my mind as to what we can do with the internet. So with no further ado, here's Steven Taylor. Again, thank you for taking the time, because I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about, well, maybe I should set this conversation up by sharing the intention. I really want to hear what you have to say, and I will tell you why I want to hear what you have to say in a minute, but on online education. That's really what I'm really curious about, because I've been following your stuff for, I don't know, probably since you started.
That's scary, because there's some bad stuff out there.
but I have, and one thing that I've become more and more, I guess, attracted to is that you seem to have a very how do I put it? Like straight to the point, and like learning is much more than just the flashy stuff. You're very there's real stuff, and I mean that with love, but there's real stuff that needs to be learned before one can start learning or addressing, even playing. And I see you talking about that often. So that's why I'm so curious and interested in talking to you today. So I really appreciate that. But for everyone, those two people who don't know who you are in the online drumming world, feel free to share your backstory. Take it away.
You got it. So I started drumming when I was around 14. Was when I started in school band. I was homeschooled, so I was that weird kid that stayed home and did school. Back in the day, it was really strange. Nowadays, lots of people do it. And so my whole educational environment growing up was different up until really middle school. When I decided I wanted to go into, I wanted to have a normal, quote unquote, high school experience. So I went in 8th grade, but I wanted to be in school band. The problem is they start you in school band in 6th grade. And so in 8th grade, they said I could do it, but I had to be in the 6th grade band. So I was this big, oaf in the back of the room with all these 6th graders trying to learn, the drums while all my 8th grade buddies went to their classes. So really humble beginnings with that. I got my first drum kit when I was 15, 16, and immediately set it up and played Weezer's Blue album. Like that was what I wanted to play, was the Sweater Song by Weezer. I knew I could probably catch that one. And the week, actually, I think it was the week I got my drum set, we had the drummer at my church leave, and my mom was talking to the minister of music, and he said, was expressing that he had left, and she said, well, my son plays drums. And so he came up, he said, your mom said you played drums. And I said, no, I have a drum kit, but I definitely don't play drums yet. And he said, well, I need you to play this weekend. And I said, I don't know that you're hearing me. I don't play the drums yet. I'm working on it. So the first couple of weeks I had my drum set, I actually played 3 different gigs, a men's breakfast, a youth service, and a Sunday service. The first weekend, and he said, don't worry about it, just watch my hands, I'll get you through it. And to this day, he's like a father to me in the musical sense. and so many others. And that began a really fast learning process for me. It didn't feel fast, but I look back now, and by the time I graduated high school, I had thousands of hours of stage time, rehearsal time, most of it for free, because I was playing in my local church, and they needed a player 3 times a week, and rehearsals came with that. And I had my own punk rock group. And at 16, I took my first professional gig. I did a local stage show, so I started playing out. And then by 19, I stepped into my first full-time house gig on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, and auditioned for that. And I think the only reason I was able to step into that was because I'd put so much time and given so much time just doing it for free, just for the experience of playing. And I did New Orleans, played down there for 3 years. I was at John Wayner's Famous Door for about a year, and then I moved down the street to a place called the Bourbon Street Blues Company, BBC. And after 2.5, 3 years, I kind of looked around. It was the cover environment, so I felt it was a great schooling for me, because I was learning all of these songs. You know, I'm learning Tower of Power, and it was a 7-piece horn band. Learning James Brown stuff. I'm learning, all this Motown stuff. The Chicago stuff. Like, I mean, just amazing drum parts. Danny Serafini stuff. Like, amazing stuff that I, as a punk rock kid, I didn't know anything about it, you know. And after about 3 years, I felt like I had done all I could do in that environment. I went back and got a scholarship, a jazz studies scholarship at the University of Southern Mississippi. So I went back there and finished up my jazz studies degree, and then moved to Nashville. So, and that kind of started me on the course I am now, because the music industry, would have been about 11 or 12 years ago, and it's still changing, but it had started to really fall apart at that point. Labels were falling apart. Nobody knew what was working. Road gigs were not the same as they used to be. Touring wasn't the same as it used to be. In-town work was drying up because studios, those big studios that had been around forever, that had been supported by record labels, were falling apart. And now you've got guys that are in their houses in, little 12 by 13 rooms that can put out an album, and it hits the charts. And so I wound up quitting music for about 7 years. I just got real disheartened with the whole thing, and saw that it just wasn't working. And I picked up personal training, and which I've always been into fitness. And so I started training between 50 and 55 sessions a week with people, while at the same time I got into an original band, and we wound up, it was just supposed to be for fun. And we wound up getting signed by Universal Records. And so that wound up to be something else. But that was good in the end, because we got dropped by the label after about a year. And I used that money to pour into the business that I now have, which is teaching online. And most people, if they know me from my YouTube channel or my Instagram channel or something like that, where I'm really active. So, but that's why I've been doing that full time now since 2015. So.
No, that already gives me a lot to work with, because I guess the next natural question would be, where did the passion for education come from?
It's a funny thing, because I always grew up. I wanted to be a player. Like, that was all I wanted to be, and that's what I did for so many years. So actually, the odd part of my career is the part that everybody sees now. I was talking to somebody the other day, and Tim works for me. He's a really talented drummer, and he does all the editing for me on videos and audio and that kind of stuff. And he said, you've got this whole backstory that nobody knows. He said, they just know you as this guy that showed up online. And he said, you've got this backstory of like tens of thousands of hours just in the trenches of doing the work. He said, you need to talk more about that. So coming up, I actually picked a jazz studies major because I could do that, and it didn't require me to be in orchestra or to be in marching band, and it also didn't require me to teach when I got out. I didn't want to teach. I had no desire to teach high school kids that didn't want to learn. It just never attracted, that whole idea of like going into an environment where your parents are making you be in band, and this wasn't very inspiring to me. But I taught privately, and the students that really took off, they really inspired, and I always enjoyed that. My father was a pastor growing up. And so I grew up listening to him speak publicly for my whole life. And he was very good at it. He was very good at what he did. A very good communicator, a very good storyteller. He told great jokes. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of story timing that I learned from him and how to curate a good story and keep the attention of people when they're listening to you. So whenever I quit, my wife Kelly, she said, "Are you going to get back into, music?" And I said, "I don't know," but I said I want to be able to say who I work with and where I work and how much I get paid and how much I work. I want to be, if I do the work and then I see the benefit, I don't want to be at the whim of somebody giving me a call and offering me a $50 gig just because I need the money that week. And so I started a blog, which a lot of people, don't know about. It's out there in the netherworld somewhere. it's still floating around out there. And then I told her, I said, maybe somebody would want, this was kind of YouTube had just really come around. And I didn't even own a computer. And I said, maybe somebody would want to take lessons or download them. Or I said, I don't know. Maybe there's some way the internet can be used to teach. And I just kind of left it with that thought because I had to switch careers to go into personal training. And then, we had a kid and we bought a house and then we had another kid and I had to save up to redo the house and then redo it. Like it was this whole process to just get mics and a drum set up in a studio, which was really just a garage with no heat and no AC. It took me 3 or 4 years to turn the boat like that. So it was a very long process of doing that. But I guess to your question, I'm beating around the bush here. I never thought I would love drumming, but I never thought I would love teaching, but I always loved drumming and communicating parts to other players or showing them that whole camaraderie thing that kind of happens in a practice room in college where somebody sits down and they're like, "Oh, dude, check this out." And you're kind of winging those ideas back and forth. That was always really inspiring to me. And I didn't realize that teaching could be that way, where you're doing much more of that just in a more organized fashion. And so I don't know, I guess I just really took to the format and liked it. I enjoyed being able to teach and get feedback from them and give them feedback. And if they weren't interested, they could just leave. Like they could just turn it off. They didn't have to be there. And that's what inspires me to do it, is because if they don't want to watch it, please don't watch it, But if you do, it's there for you. I would love to teach. So there was no way for me to know that this teaching format would be a possibility because the internet didn't even exist, when I first started playing. It just started coming around in high school. So somebody asked me, they said, did you think that you would teach online? I said, did I, think that, this cloud would be invented where we could put information and people? I said, no, I had no clue. So it really came as kind of a backdoor love of mine that I didn't know about.
Well, I still struggle to understand this whole world of the internet, so you're winning in my book, because every day I look at, especially when it comes to education, every day I look at all these options that we have, and I guess I choose to ignore to avoid becoming overwhelmed by it, because there's even social media alone. I'm very much, I use it, but I don't really consume it, or I try not to anyway. But it's interesting how, you mentioned that your father being a pastor and how that inspired you because of how easy it seemed to come to him to communicate, right? And it seems to be a common thread, like we all have, and everyone that I talk to in this podcast especially, they seem to have these father figures, if not an actual father, who really inspire them. And for me, it was actually also my parents, who are both teachers. So yeah, it runs in the family. So I saw them doing that. I saw them, for me, my experience was similar to yours, but different in the sense that what really I felt attracted towards was seeing them talking about teaching all the time, because there was a couple of teachers, literally. So they would talk about the job all the time. And there I was, right? 5 years old, 6 years old, 18 years old, hearing those conversations on a daily basis. And of course, when it was time to choose a path, that's just where I had to go there.
Right.
But I knew already that you were a certified personal trainer. So I wanted to ask you actually, how do you bridge those two things, right? Being a music teacher and that personal training aspect of your, I guess, let's say your personality.
So it's very similar to me. Losing weight and getting in shape is not rocket science. Neither is drumming. But we build it up to be this big, daunting task. And really, if you'll just do the right things in the right order, you can get consistent results. So it's all in the plan of what you put people through. And I had a specific way that I trained. I had a specific group of people that I was very good with. And I could tell people right off, I can get you those results in the way that you want them if you'll do what I say. If you'll do the required steps, you will get the results. And it's the same thing with teaching the drums. I say, if you'll ignore all the other distractions that are happening on the internet and social media, and you'll do the steps I'm telling you to do in the order that I'm telling you to do them, it will work. Not because I said it will work. It will work because historically, that's how humans learn. That's how the brain functions. I've really gotten into the methods of learning that we use, how the brain absorbs information, assimilates that information. All of those things attract me. And to me, training was just, for drum students, I come up with a drum plan for them. I don't go by the book that every drum student needs to come into my studio and go through the same program. And there are teachers like that, and they have great success. I view each student as an individual. I view them starting at an individual point, and then I'm going to curate my teaching and my methods towards them. There's some students that are very visual learners. There's some that auditory. There are some that just need me to sit there and play it so they can see it. And so in the video format, it's really a challenge to get that across to them of the visual, the audio. It kind of encompasses all of that. Training's the same way, though. You're just teaching them how to work out and putting them through a program. As well, it's a big accountability thing. And we as teachers, that's one of the things that we are for students, is we're accountable. They're coming to that lesson. They know I'm checking in with them. That type of a thing. As a trainer, if they know they're going to have to come there and tell you that they had 2 milkshakes, I remember I left the gym one day right after one of my clients, and we were trying to lose quite a bit of weight for her. And I watched her drive into the McDonald's drive-thru, like right after we had trained. and I called her and I said, "What are you doing? I'm behind you. You can't do that where I can see it. You have to do it away from me, because your next session, you're really going to get it if you go to McDonald's right now." Of course, I'm just getting a water. I'm like, well, you need to go home and get water. You don't need to go to McDonald's to get water. So I think to me, they're very similar in that you're just teaching. You're teaching them healthy methods and healthy eating and how to take care of their body. And with drums, you're teaching them drums. To me, it's just teaching. I never thought I would be a teacher. So this is all, it's not new territory. It's just amazing to me that that's how I make my living now, because I always said I didn't want to do it, but I love it. I love the format that I get to teach.
Well, that's the thing about teaching, man. Once you start doing it, I started teaching by accident as well. I mean, it just happened. I was living abroad and then went back to Portugal. I was basically just bored. So I was spending like all my day, like the whole day at this new music store that I had opened. And the owner one day just asked me like randomly, Guy, can you read music? And I was like, yeah, I guess I can. I could. And he was like, okay, do you want to teach drums? And that was it.
Right.
It was the most random, and I've been a teacher since then, and this was 13 years ago.
Yeah.
It's crazy how fate works, if you will. But I wanted to ask you, because you and that's why I was curious about the personal training thing, because I've watched maybe dozens, if not hundreds, of your videos over the years, and again, the focus that you seem to have is mindset. Is really like getting people to think about the process of learning, and that's something that for me, that's a shared passion of mine. And that's why I had to talk to you, because that's what I do. I really, if I had to say, I don't know, like if I were to project what's going to happen in the next 10 or 20 years of my life, I'm not sure if I'm going to be a drum teacher. That's
Sure.
how, right? Like, but I know for a fact that I will still be working, or trying to help people to learn better. That's really my main focus. And you mentioned that was something that you were very curious about, like learning how the brain learns and how it absorbs information. How did that come about? Why I guess, did you become curious about that?
Well, I became curious about it because, whenever you teach online versus in person, you're teaching at scale. So you're teaching to a lot more people. Some of them go deeper, some of them don't. And I was continually seeing this recurring theme of they didn't know how to practice. They were put into this situation of learning an instrument, but then also we wanted them to do this other thing that went along with learning the instrument called practice. Well, practice is a whole skill within itself. If you can practice an instrument well, you can also practice basketball well. You can also practice baseball well. You can also practice, whatever it may be, because practice is about going through steps, using feedback loops, creating a learning environment, understanding how the brain assimilates that information, understanding what repetition plays in the role, what myelin is, and how that functions in the brain. All of those things are really important, and I'm really passionate about helping people. That's a huge passion of mine. I help tons of people every day that never pay me a dime. And I mean, if anybody's ever emailed me in, they know I answer all my emails. Some of them I'll give them 5 or 6 minute voice recordings back. I really try to just help. And I think teaching is just a natural thing of that. And I found that I wasn't helping them how they needed to be helped. And so I started diving into, and it started with the acquisition of expert performance. Was it the role of something in the acquisition of expert performance? I'm trying to remember the exact name of it, but it was a study that was done. It's where the 10,000 hour rule came from, and lots of other things that people refer to. Some know that from Malcolm Gladwell. He kind of popularized that. Once I read that, I thought, oh, wow, there's this whole field that I just don't even really know anything about. And so over the process of a few years, I spent hundreds of hours just studying practice, teachers, teaching methods, coaches, how the brain works, best way to assimilate information, expert performers, what does their warm-up look like, what does their practice time look like, and that really began to help me translate that to a drumming student where I could have them come in here and something they've been struggling with for 3 weeks, we can actually nail it in about half an hour just because I'm putting them through a very methodical process. And they don't understand what's going on behind the scenes, but I get it because I've just spent time learning. I actually developed a whole course on it called The Art of Practice. It's over a 20-hour course, and it's just about constructing your practice time, getting more bang for your buck. Because professionals practice differently than those that are not professionals. That's how they got to be professionals. It's not what they practice. Everybody thinks it's like a magical exercise. It's not what they practice. It's how they practiced it. It's how they incorporated that into their play.
You just quoted, I've got all these quotes printed on the walls of my music school. One of them is exactly that. It's not what you practice, it's how you practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, the name of that, excuse me, I kept blanking. The Role of Deliberate Practice in the Acquisition of Expert Performance. That's the name of that. It's downloadable for free on the internet. If you just really want to, have a boring read 40 pages long, you can do it. I think it's really interesting.
I will definitely do it. Yeah, I'll definitely do it. No, man, that's really amazing. I mean, there's only so many people who really have the patience, the dedication, the passion to go to tap into things like that, like how the brain learns and how the brain processes information and how it memorizes, and then how do you recall information, how do you sustain attention. Like teachers, and I say this because again, I really know that world fairly well. Even I'm not even only considering music teachers, just teachers in general. Really,
Sure.
only a few focus on that sort of stuff. I mean, most of them are just spewing out curriculum and material, and that's it. And then hopefully something will stick, but most doesn't, obviously. It's just the law of odds.
And there's so much that there's so many elements of it that people don't think about, for instance, false rewards. They don't understand that telling a student they did a good job. For instance, here in the States, we have this No Child Left Behind, where even if they're failing, we pass them. And that's doing them no good because they know they didn't do a good job. And they've done studies on this saying that if you give them that reinforcement of like, that's okay, good effort, way to go, good job, like there's encouragement, but then there's building up this false thing of like, oh, you really did a great job, when in actuality, you didn't do a good job. Matter of fact, you sounded like crap, and my old teachers would just call me out and be like, that sounds horrible. You need to redo that, And so there's this thing of like young kids understanding on a deeper, like subconscious level, they're just telling me that they know I really didn't do good, but we're moving on. And so it's all these little subtle nuances that they pick up on, and we think we're doing them a service, where really we're doing them a disservice by not just really sticking to the guns and saying, no, that sounded bad, let's do it again. And then when they really do get it, then the reward part of it is so much bigger for them. And it actually does matter. It makes a big difference at that point. So there's so many smaller elements of this that that popular notion and political correctness, it really makes teaching hard sometimes.
I hear you. It's very interesting to hear this from outside my head because not that long ago I posted a video called "Safe Spaces?" ? Which is a whole video is just me ranting, I guess, about not necessarily about safe spaces per se or exclusively, but what you just said, right? The fact that we are creating this culture of indulgence and just allowing.
The key is, and I think what you're hitting on is, everyone thinks that when they tell someone they didn't perform something well, they're judging them. And as a teacher, that's not a judgmental call on the student. I'm simply stating a fact. You didn't perform that correctly. We need to do that again. Whereas they've taken it so personal of, I'm not of worth. And that's not the fact at all. I didn't say you're not good. I said you didn't do that correctly. That means there's a ton of room for you to do that. So the safe space thing is great. It's when they come in to the teaching environment, this is a safe space. I'm going to be honest with you. You be honest with me, and we're going to make some headway here. I hate it when a student comes in and tells me they practiced something, because I tell them, I'm going to know within about 30 seconds if you practiced it. So please don't lie to me and waste my time having to figure out that, oh, in fact, you didn't practice this. You be honest with me, I'm going to be honest with you, and you're going to see some huge headway when you do it that way. But yeah, it's got to be a safe learning environment. They have to feel like they can fail with support, that type of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't defend any sort of, and it's not my style at all, any sort of punishment and even like harshness in the way we teach. But again, the way safe spaces have been, I guess, or what they've become, right? Because I too believe that, of course, the teaching environment should be a safe space, a space of honesty and truth. But the way that this whole new culture has repackaged what a safe space is, it means don't tell me that I'm wrong, because that makes me feel bad. So I don't like you now. And it's just this
really, that's just a political correct space. Yeah. That's not a safe space. We used to have safe spaces that we can learn in. Now we just have PC spaces where everybody's telling everybody they're doing a good job and it's okay, whatever, it's amazing what the internet has done in some ways. Good in some other ways. But and others not so.
I guess, I had one of my points here was what your thoughts are on the current state of education, and we are already discussing that organically. And what do you think the future, let's say, everything progresses so quickly, but let's look at the next 10 years. And maybe we can talk about education at a broader level, but also maybe discuss online education, because I know that's your world. So I'm curious.
Sure. So
I think education, well, I can, in the States here, it's in a horrible state. We're almost 30th in the world in education. We've fallen for number one. It's horrible. What they're doing is not working. how they go about educating people is not working. How they go about passing them from grade to grade is not working. They've done studies, and schools are now, it's required when you go to high school, you need to have an iPad in a lot of schools to take to class. And yet almost 80% of teachers have said mobile devices, tablets, phones, all of those things, whether they're used for learning or not, are a distraction in the classroom. So you have 80% of the teaching force saying, hey, this is a distraction. And then you have the people that run the thing saying, oh, we need to put these in the classroom. It just doesn't mesh up. And so I think technology, when it's used in the correct way, is really beneficial. But I think that when we don't manage our technology correctly, because it appeals to so many bottom-up instincts and distractions, buzzes, bells, rings, distracting in that you heard the text come through, even though you didn't check it. Now you're internally distracted because you're thinking about what that person said. And even if you did check it and say, I'll respond to that later, you're now thinking about what you're going to say later. It's all of these deeper levels of distraction and focus that those things take away. So I'm very big with my students. I say, look, I want you to watch the lesson, and then I want you to get away from the lesson. I want you to, the same way you would come to me in person, watch it, and then go away. And they say, well, I want to watch it while I'm at the drum set. No, I don't want you to do that. I want you to watch it. I want you to take notes. Then I want you to take the sheet music and go to your drum set, and I want you to play. And if you need to rewatch it later, come back to that. So I really try to, in the online environment, give them a learning environment where you can chart your progress, you can see where you are within a lesson course, all of that stuff, give you all the materials, but at the same time encourage them to print the music off, to go away from their mobile devices, turn the phones off, all of those things, so that they're not a slave of a device, which is really what has become. They're showing a massive increase in people, very normal people, that are displaying obsessive compulsive tendencies, because they've now taught themselves to self-interrupt. So if the mind gets into something, this is interesting for us teachers, because as they're working through something, once the mind hits something that's hard and needs a little work, the mind triggers boredom. And when we trigger boredom, it goes, because it wants something fancy, it wants something that's going to entertain automatically. And that's just not the way practice is all the time. And so you self-interrupt and go, oh, I need to check Facebook. Oh, I need to check my email. Oh, let me just get on here and check whatever it may be. And so all of those distractions are a huge, huge, huge negative in the practice space. I did a study of over 600 drummers. Between the drummers, I had 2 questions, and I had over 2,000 responses from these drummers on those 2 questions. And it was simply, what's your biggest problem in your practice time? And what is your biggest question about your practice time? The biggest problem by 4 times was focus. They were distracted. They couldn't focus. The second biggest problem was, I don't know what to work on. And the third biggest was, I don't know how to work on it. So all the top 3 dealt with this issue of focus. And that wasn't an issue when I was a kid. Like when I sat down to practice, I didn't have anything to grab and distract my attention. I really practiced. So I think the current state of education is, we're in an awesome place where we have all of these tools and resources, but it's overwhelming students whose cognitive functions have not developed, because those don't develop until our 20s. Your cognitive functions, which is focus, decision-making abilities, goal management, goal setting, those are all cognitive prefrontal cortex functions. And those don't develop, we're getting deeper than I meant to, those don't develop until your 20s. And that's why you have predominantly guys making really bad decisions up until their 20s, like it was a bad idea to drive that truck off of that cliff to try to ramp over it, like but they don't think, because they're not forecasting ahead. They don't have, they can't think through the problem, because it's honestly just hasn't matured in them yet. And so when they don't have the ability to ignore those very basic things like a phone, distractions, all of those things. So that's been a big part of my job teaching online, has been being a guide, being someone that is going to be accountable to them, giving them a format to work in that isn't a distraction, but that actually helps their learning process. People get frustrated at me whenever they go through some of my courses because it'll be an 8-week course and I'll send out 1 week at a time. And they'll say, well, they'll say, I want the whole course. And I say, you won't go through the course. Yes, I will. I say, no, because I've released it that way several times. And when I release it that way, everybody comments and puts questions on the first lesson and nobody comments on the rest of the lesson. Whereas if I release it 1 week at a time, every week there's more comments, there's more engagement because I'm forcing them to slow their learning process. And I still release some of my courses all at once and you do it a la carte. But most of them these days, increasingly, if they're a one-off course, I'm throttling how much they can go through at one time for on purpose.
Yeah, no, I love that. As you were talking, I was thinking about this idea of, I don't know how possible it is. Again, this is really not my world, but, to release an online lesson, but then set some sort of auto-destruction system thing that the file just disappears after, 72 hours or whatever. And it's just a crazy idea, but you nailed it. Immediately you said, I already do that by dosing the delivery rate. And
sure.
And that's exactly, I love it. Yeah. I mean, that makes 100% sense. And I don't think at least I don't think I could binge watch a course. I mean,
well, that's the thing. They binge watch it and then they never work through it. So it's useless. I wasted their time. They wasted my time. Like, it's no use to anyone. And I was, speaking to an online marketer and he said, yeah, but everybody, they just want the information. So I just give it to them. I said, yeah, well, my kids just want to eat cake all day. So do I just give it to it? Doesn't mean it's healthy for them. They don't know. They don't know. I know. And so if I'm as the teacher, and when I kind of revamped my website, I did a huge revamp, and we're in the middle of one right now as well. But back in 2015, and I moved to teaching to one topic for a certain set of lessons. So if they wanted to learn the Mambo, they started the Mambo lesson track. And I was real nervous about releasing it. And my wife was sitting with me, and she's a teacher too. She is an elementary education teacher. She stays home with the kids now. But she said, well, I said, I'm just concerned they won't like it. And she said, well, who cares? I said, well, I mean, I kind of care if they like it because, it's how I make a living. And she said, but it's a better way to teach. So who cares? And that's kind of when I was like, oh, you're right, honey. But it really took sticking to my guns. And I think it's paying off in spades. I have students just making insane amounts of progress and letting me know about it. So it's one of the biggest things that keeps me going and keeps me trying to refine that process so it's better for them.
Yeah, I mean, if we stop focusing on the students, I mean, then what's the point? That's it, man. So what do you think the future lies ahead of us?
I think that colleges and universities are becoming too expensive. I don't think that the jobs they're training you for pay enough to justify. It's kind of like how health insurance has changed here in the States. And the cost outweighs the benefit with a lot of plans these days. In other words, if I'm going to have to pay $1,400 for a catastrophic insurance plan that's really a piece of junk, well, what benefit am I getting out of that? I'd rather just pay the penalty every year and put that into a savings plan. And in a couple of years, I'll be able to self-fund it. You see what I'm saying? And it's the same way with universities and teaching on that level. I think the costs are beginning to outweigh the benefits, as well as the job market's changing. And so I see a large shift to online learning. I see, in my eyes, it's taken me a long time to convince certain people in my life that online learning is relevant. But I think they're realizing that it's here to stay. It's not going away. It's the way the kids would rather learn. It's a more efficient manner if we build it correctly. So I think in the future, we're going to see a huge section of college professors, I know because I'm talking and working with some of them, that are going to be onboarding a lot of their courses and teaching them in other places because they're phenomenal teachers and it's phenomenal content. And as well, I think we're going to begin to continue to see mixed mediums. So a teacher that has a full-time drum school is now able to self-publish their own stuff at no cost, only whenever orders are made. I think we're going to increasingly see them have online tools that are easier to use, so they don't have to. It's just easier for them to teach. I mean, I already have a lot of teachers that use several of my videos for their students, and that's great. It's kind of like supplemental education. They can go, okay, let's watch this video real quick, and now let's discuss it, and I'll show it to you. And so I think we're going to continue to see kind of that merging of real in-person stuff with utilizing the digital stuff. But the interesting place I'm seeing movement is in universities and that collegiate level. It's very interesting to me to watch that market right now.
I agree. I mean, there is definitely a shift, and there is definitely, I mean, access alone, online education is just an outstanding tool because, for a guy like me, for example, I can be living in England and, learn from you, learn from Dave Weckel, also opened now an online drum school, go and get a bachelor's degree at a university in the States without moving. Always living in England.
And what's amazing is, I mean, Tim just messaged me today. He said, "Hey, Chick Corea has gotten into teaching as well." And so you have all these legendary performers, and the music industry is changing so much, and the work is drying up and going to different places, and they don't understand how to monetize the work. I think it's the best time in the history of the world to be a musician. I don't think there's ever been a better time to be a real artist. But those that worked in the old model are having to find new ways to supplement that income. So you're seeing a lot of them turn to teaching, which is great. I would, when I was a kid, I would have killed to be able to learn from Dave Weckel. You know what I'm saying? And so I think it's all positive, but the musical landscape's changing, not just educational, just the music industry itself has had such a massive shift that it's going to take a lot of retooling for a lot of people. In the next few years.
No, that's awesome, man. So maybe I'm gonna shift gears a little bit, not too much, and I want to know what your thoughts are on mentorship and our role as educators to provide not only the material but then that extra, layer of training, which is that relationship mentor and mentee. What do you think that entails, and how can we do that at scale?
I think it's the most important thing. If you think back about all the different big events in your life and big changes, I'm sure you would be able to find one person that was very instrumental in that portion of your life. And it changes. It's kind of like in movies. Every good story, there's a guide. So, Katniss in the Hunger Games has Haymitch, and, in Star Wars, it's Yoda. And you have all of these people that the hero is the big main character, but they run into an issue and they don't know how to solve the issue. And so then comes in the mentor or the guide and the Yodas of the world. And I think it's really, really, really important for teachers to understand how much of a mentor and a guide they are for their students. I know my teachers growing up where I still, I got to film a course with one of my teachers a couple of weeks ago. We're working on a project together, which, I was telling Tim on the way back, I was like, I'm just like blown away that I get to work with him, because in my mind, he's such an incredible talent. He's such a mentor of mine. And so I think we have incredible power as teachers to be these huge positive influences on our students. And if you'll watch my YouTube channel this next year, I'm not like assuming I'm a Yoda for everybody. That's not what I'm doing, but I am recognizing that much more. And I'm dealing with the questions that I get that are drumming related. I posted a video today, balancing a family and drumming. Because I have students, whether they just do it for a hobby or whether they do it full time, they're dealing with that thing of balance. How do I do something I love, but also make sure my family's cared for and knows I love them, but also I need to do this. And so me being able to be honest and talk about my faults and my flaws, how I made mistakes, some of my successes, I think it's a huge, huge benefit of of the internet, especially because you can do this at scale. I've got guys that I follow online outside of the drumming world that are very much mentors to me in very different areas of life, and they have no clue. They don't know unless I emailed to tell them, and who knows if they'd be able to read it because they have lots of followers, but I've kind of gravitated towards them because they are a mentor in sorts for where I am in life. And eventually I'll leave them and go to another one, So I think the role of mentorship can't be stressed enough with teachers. Like I don't even think I would put teaching drums as the most important thing as I would being a mentor, teaching them how to be a responsible person, that when they come to a lesson, you need to be prepared. If you're not prepared and we have 3 lessons that you're not prepared for, we're going to suspend the lessons for a couple of weeks and see and then if you keep coming not prepared, I'm going to speak to your parents, and then we're going to suspend the lessons indefinitely until you decide to get back on the train. Teaching them those things of, this is how we prepare for a gig. This is what's expected of you professionally. Okay, when you come in here, I expect this of you because if you ever were on a gig, this is what would be expected of you. I think setting those precedences and living a life that exemplifies that, which is not at all easy. And that's not saying it's a life without faults. I think being a mentor, the faults are more important than the good parts. I think that speaks much more truly to a student than anything else. Some of my best lessons were watching my teachers make mistakes and trying to correct them as they're going. And it just let me know, oh, wow, so they're like a real human. They have problems too, and they can't correct it. And, I think that is our number one role as teachers, is to be a mentor and a guide. And then we're just mentoring and guiding them through drumming. I think that it can't be overestimated enough how important that is.
I couldn't agree more, man. I mean, do you think that being a mentor can be learned? Say you are a music teacher, maybe you teach locally, you have, I don't know, you live in a small town. I came from a small town, right? So it wasn't really the case back then that I needed to be, quote unquote, a Yoda, because, there were only like 3 or 4 drum teachers. But when I left and as I then started teaching, in places where not only the competition was bigger, but there's just more, I guess I felt more a sense of responsibility because I really felt like I needed to do a good job for my students. Maybe that was just aging and growing up. But I felt like that ability to mentor came from, again, observing my parents, right? And that all came back when I needed it, those skills. So my parents, in a way, were my Yodas, and now I was just passing it on. But do you think that can be learned, how to be a mentor?
I mean, I think the basic skills of mentorship can be learned, but I don't think everybody loves it. I don't think, and I think that's the difference between the real passionate teachers and those that are just in it because they need to, make money so that they can, buy food, that type of a deal. I mean, some people, it comes more intuitive. Some, like you and I, were raised in an environment where we had great parents that were mentors to us to a certain point in many areas, and taught me the way to encourage a student, the way to see when a student was having issues, but those issues are not directly related to their drumming. Like that kid's parents are going through a divorce, and so now we have a bigger issue on the plate when they come for a drum lesson besides, oh, you didn't practice this week. It's like 15 layers deeper as to that kid's whole world's being torn apart. And we as teachers need to understand that's a reality for where they are. It's not a counseling session, but it is a time for them to get away from that, to decompress a little bit. So if they come in at the beginning of a lesson, I don't jump into like, okay, we're going through this rudiment. Hey man, how was your week? We spend the first 5 or 10 minutes naturally getting into the lesson, chatting a little bit, laughing a little bit, allowing them to vent a little bit and decompress, and then we can go into the lesson. And I'm always going to try to end the lesson on a positive note and let them leave with a positive feeling of being built up. And even if it was a bad lesson, even if they really just weren't prepared, did a bad job, I'm always trying to end it on a positive note so that they can go back out and tackle the bigger issues that they're facing. I don't know. I think the elements of mentorship can be taught, but I think the passion and the want to help people just on like a basic level, I don't know if that can be taught. I think that it has to be learned through just experience of that type of a thing. It's an interesting question, though.
So I talked to someone who's an expert at doing all these things that we do, but he just does it better. Last week I talked to Dom Famularo, and Dom was saying exactly the same, man. He was just saying, like, if there's no laughter in the classroom, it's on the teacher that we're not promoting a positive and enjoyable atmosphere, and that's gonna ultimately get in the way of the learning. And I just wanted to share that because he was, for me, although it might sound obvious when we say it, I find, I guess, still myself sometimes so, so distracted by, achieving things during the lesson, and you just want to help the student so much that you end up not helping him, with what matters the most, I guess.
Yeah. And Dom's a great example to bring up because the people that inspire me are far different than people would think. I'm much more interested in legacy, like what am I leaving in this world, rather than I am what stages did I get to play on, like who knew my name. And so you have these guys like Freddie Gruber and Dom Famularo and all of these, Ed Soph, all of these guys, Alan Dawson, they're put on, like you hear people talk about, oh man, Dave Weckle's phenomenal, oh man, but then somebody says Alan Dawson, and it's like there's just ripples through the crowd of like, oh man, Alan Dawson, because he was this force of nature when it came to teaching and his ability to pass that on to people. And it wasn't that he could explain the paradiddle in such a different way. It was his whole approach to the student. That's the difference. And the same with Dom, who I highly look up to. The same with Freddie Gruber. They're these characters and these talents and these mentors that their career has been built on helping other people. And to me, those are the people that I look at and I go, that's what I want to do. I don't care to play with a #1 charting artist. That's great and it's super fun, and the crowds and the accolades, that's a lot of fun. But that's just, at this point, I'm much more interested in going a career path of an Ed Soph or an Alan Dawson, or and having that history of being a solid teacher and mentor and just all around good person. You don't have anybody say bad things about Dom Famularo. Like nobody says bad things about Alan Dawson. Freddie Gruber, they might say is a little crazy, but they don't say bad things about him because they just lived their life as honestly and humbly as they could, and tried to communicate that. So, yeah, Dom's a great person, great teacher, great person. Love him.
He's just such an inspiration to me, and it's funny because it seems like, naturally or not, but everyone that I've spoken to so far in the last 6 episodes of this podcast have been either those people. So I've spoken to Dom Famularo and Alan Herman, who's also another educator that I really admire, or the mentees, right? So I spoke to Klaus Hessler, who was a longtime student of Jim Chapin, and then I spoke to Daniel Glass, who was a longtime student of Freddie Gruber, and so on, right?
And that's interesting because you're talking about, you mentioned 2 guys who I think are headed to be in that same category. I have high respect for Daniel Glass as well as Klaus. I think they're headed to be in that category of just this teacher that they have an incredible passion and knowledge of the instrument and the history of the instrument, and are able to relay that in a very entertaining way. I think those are 2 excellent examples of people that just in our drumming community are not interested in being right for the sake of being right. They're just interested in being right because historically that's just the way things are. Yeah, I love those guys. Great talents.
I agree. All right, man. I want to ask you, because we're getting to the end of this, I want to ask you, what's your advice for, say, an upcoming drum teacher? So a guy who's now 19 years old or 20 years old, he's just finished his music degree, and he's considering the idea of teaching. What would you say?
Define some goals for what you want out of a career. I think that's the part we skip so much. You have to set some, like, in 10 years, it would be cool if my life looked like this. And then once you have that idea of, like, I think that would look really neat, I think I would enjoy living that life, then we backtrack and we deconstruct that and go, well, how do I get there? And that's the only way I got to the point where I was, or am now currently in my journey, is just going, I would like to, and then I just made a laundry list of, I want to teach in this way, I'd like to do this, I would like to do, and now that I'm here, I'm constantly adjusting that, because I got here and I realized, oh, okay, so that's not really what I thought it was. That's not really the way I wanted that to go, and shifting that. But it takes a constant effort to forecast and goal set into the future, and then work backwards from there so that your whole career tracks to that. So that if you have this idea that you want your career to look like this, and you have an opportunity that comes that's counterintuitive to that, or goes in the other direction, we have the ability to say, yes, that's actually a good enough thing that I want to go do that, or no, that detracts from my overall goal and purpose. And so I'm going to say no to that, because this is what I said is important. This is what I'm tracking to. And if I go do that, that's not in the game plan. I would just tell them to spend a lot of time tasting a lot of things, doing a lot of things, having a lot of fun, because 19, gosh, man, go do stuff, go experience some life. Right now, you think you could do everything, and go experience some life. But as well as you do it, keep those things that you love and figure out how you can incorporate them into your life. I always thought I wanted to be a touring musician. Growing up, that's what I thought I wanted to do. And now, with where I am in life, I've got a 9-month-old, I've got a 10-year-old, and I've got a 7-year-old. Both are boys, the older ones. So they're getting to an age where dad's super important in their life, which hopefully that'll last for at least a couple of years before they hit to be teenagers. And then I become like just the guy that's telling them what to do. But, and so I wouldn't go on the road right now for all the money in the world. I'll go on the road temporarily for certain things. But if it's a tour, they're like, we're going to be gone for 6 months, and that's just like the way things are from now on. I don't care how much you're paying me. That doesn't work with my goals, because my goals are not all monetary, and they're not all professional, and they're not all personal, and they're not all relational. They're all intermingled, but I have goals for each section. So they all have to track together to make that happen. That's what I would tell them, just to really sit down, taste things, goal set some, decide, what they want family to look like, what they want relationships to look like, their money to look like, all of those things. And then go for it, man. Work as hard as you can, as much as you can. We only get one shot at life.
That's true. Sound advice, man. So before I ask you the last question, where can these people find your stuff? Feel free to plug any new courses that you might be releasing. The floor is yours.
Sure.
Yeah, you can go to Stevens Drum Shed. That's with a PH.com, and I got a ton of free resources there. I also have a membership. If you need that help, you can find me on YouTube. This is 2018, so I've got a new schedule every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 11 a.m. New videos are happening. I'm active on Instagram. You can just look up Stevens Drum Shed on Instagram. I'm posting there 2 to 3 times a day, always lessons, always something to try to benefit people, even if it's just give you a laugh. Of course, Facebook, you can find me on there. And then also I have another wing of the business called The Art of Practice. And you can find that theartofpractice.online. And if you go there, there's some free resources for learning to practice. And we just got done filming a chorus with one of my old instructors from the University of Southern Mississippi on jazz or just improvisation. No matter what instrument you play, how do we improvise? It's really, really good. So I'm excited about kind of growing that wing of what I do as well. So if whatever instrument you play, that would be a great resource for you to just kind of go get on the email list and keep up with what's going on over there, because I've got a lot of stuff happening with that. And as well, this year we'll see a TV. This is a weird thing that I never thought I would do. So we've spent the last year building a TV channel, and we've partnered with some new technology. We've partnered with a company that we've now signed with Comcast Cable and several other cable companies, large cable providers. And in the next 3 or 4 months, we'll be in 30 million households within the U.S. and Canada, and it'll be the first on-demand drum lesson channel. So we'll see how that goes. That's another thing that I haven't really talked about, but that So soon you'll be able to find me on TV. I guess I could finally say, look, Mom, I'm on TV, kind of. If you go, search me and sign up for the lessons. But yeah, that's what the best place is to just follow the YouTube channel, because I'm really active there. And leave me comments. I try to respond to all my comments. It's getting a bit daunting. But.
Yeah, I can imagine. Nice. I'm going to leave links in the description. So last question. What would be, for you, a quote to live by?
A quote to live by. You know what? I'm going to pull it up because I looked it back up the other day. And because I'm a big quote guy. Anybody that knows me knows I love quotes. And this one really impacted me. And so I want to make sure that I say it right. And so it's by Hunter S. Thompson. And it just says, life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, wow, what a ride. I think to me that quote is just it's really inspiring. Go out there and do stuff, and don't be afraid of the bad times or the good times or the in-between times. The good times are made all the better by the bad times, just go get it, because we're all going to die at some point. And I want to get there and go, man, that was an experience, rather than get there and go, well, that kind of went how I predicted it to. I think we got to live full throttle.
I love it. Well, man, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It's humbling. It's been a pleasure.
No, I really do appreciate it. It was extremely insightful. So, guys, I'm going to leave the links in the description. Check Steven's workout. And Steven, once again, I really appreciate it, and have a good day.
Thanks, you too.
Take care, man. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
The Educational Physics Podcast.
If you would like to support this podcast, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, and also consider the idea of supporting us via our Patreon account, which is patreon.com/Leeds Music Academy. My name is João Figueiredo, and thank you for listening, and learn something today. Take care.